She wasn't supposed to be there that late. Alone, sweeping the daycare hallway long after the last child had gone home. But in the corner of the security camera's view, a black woman could be seen curled up on the floor, holding a baby close to her chest. To some, it looked unprofessional. To others, it was love. Minutes later, the child's father, a billionaire, walked in and saw everything. What he discovered would unravel a chain of events that exposed prejudice, power, and a truth the elite never wanted revealed. What really happened in that room, and why did it shake an entire city? The daycare was the kind of place that bragged about exclusivity. Glass walls, designer furniture, and tuition fees that could buy a small car every month. Parents dropped off their children in luxury SUVs, confident that money meant the best care. But beneath the polished floors and spotless smiles, there were cracks only the staff could see. Maya Ellis had been hired as an evening cleaner, a job she took not because it matched her skills, she had a degree in early childhood development, but because it was the only position offered after weeks of unanswered applications. Her skin color and quiet demeanor seemed to push her to the margins of every opportunity she chased. That night, she found little Samuel crying alone in the infant room. Hours past pickup time, his father hadn't arrived, and the lead teacher had long since left, citing policy. Maya couldn't bear to see him trembling in the crib. She knew the rules. Cleaners weren't supposed to touch the children. But Samuel's tiny hands reached through the bars, his sobs shaking his fragile body. Instinct overrode protocol. She lifted him gently, humming softly until his breathing slowed and his eyelids grew heavy. By the time she sank to the floor with him still in her arms, the hallway lights had dimmed and the world felt quiet again. She didn't hear the glass door open or notice the man in the tailored suit stepping inside. She had no idea that what he saw in that moment would ignite a storm, one that would reveal more than either of them were ready for. The man in the suit didn't speak at first. He stood in the doorway, his polished shoes silent against the floor, his gaze fixed on the sight before him. Maya only looked up when she felt Samuel stir, his small body pressing closer to her chest. She recognized the man instantly. Adrian Cole, a billionaire investor whose name appeared on the brass plaque at the daycare entrance. He was also Samuel's father. Maya rose slowly, still supporting the baby, ready to hand him over. But Samuel's tiny fingers clung to her shirt, his body stiffening the moment she tried to pass him. Adrian's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in something far more complex. By morning, whispers had already started among the staff. Maya had been caught holding a child outside her role. Some said she'd broken protocol, others suggested she'd done it for attention. But underneath the gossip was something sharper, the same prejudice that had followed her into every job interview, every staff meeting where her ideas were politely ignored. A meeting was called. The daycare's director, immaculate in a tailored blazer, spoke in clipped tones about boundaries and professionalism. To them, it didn't matter that Samuel had been left alone. What mattered was that Maya, a cleaner and a black woman at that, had crossed an invisible line into a space reserved for qualified staff. What no one in that room knew was that Maya had been quietly watching and listening for weeks. She had seen the infants left unattended when parents were late. She had seen teachers texting on their phones while toddlers cried in the corner. She had seen the way certain staff got preferential treatment, and the way others, always the darker-skinned employees, were monitored like they were one mistake away from being replaced. She had thought staying silent was the safest choice. But now, with the weight of Samuel's trust in her arms and the cold precision of the director's warning still ringing in her ears, Maya began to realize she had been given something she couldn't ignore. A moment that could either end her career or expose the truth about the place everyone in the city believed was untouchable. 2 days later, the daycare's pristine reputation shattered in the most unexpected way. Adrian Cole had requested a private meeting, not with the director, but with Maya. Word traveled fast. Staff peeked from behind doors, curious to see how the billionaire would handle the cleaner who dared cross lines. Maya entered the glass-walled conference room to find Adrian seated at the head of the table, an open laptop in front of him. The daycare's director stood off to the side, tight-lipped and pale. Without a word, Adrian pressed play on a video. It was security footage from the infant room. Samuel crying alone in his crib, the clock ticking past closing time, the lead. Teacher walking out without a glance back. Then Maya appeared in the frame. She lifted Samuel, rocked him gently, and settled on the floor until his breathing slowed. The footage had no sound, but the tenderness in the moment was undeniable. Adrian closed the laptop slowly, his eyes fixed on the director. What followed wasn't an outburst. It was worse. It was a controlled dismantling of her polished authority. He had already spoken to other parents, and stories began pouring in. Late pickups ignored, children left unattended, and, most damning, a pattern of complaints from black and brown staff about being sidelined or dismissed. Maya listened in silence, her heart pounding. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't planned to be the center of a storm. But now, sitting across from the man whose name was etched into the daycare's very identity, she realized the truth had a weight of its own. Adrian slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, financial audits, staff reports, and a list of parents willing to testify. He didn't ask her to speak. He didn't need to. By the time the director understood the scope of what was happening, her influence was gone. She was no longer the one in control of the narrative. And in that moment, Maya understood. What had started as an act of compassion was now the turning point in dismantling something much bigger than her. Within a week, the story had left the walls of the daycare and spread into the community. Parents who once boasted about their children attending the most exclusive childcare center in the city now questioned every detail they'd been told. The polished image cracked under the weight of testimonies from former staff, each echoing the same truth. Prejudice wasn't an accident here. It was a policy disguised as professionalism. The director resigned under pressure, though resigned was a gentle word for what had really happened. Investigations uncovered not only neglect but also financial mismanagement that funneled resources away from children who needed them most. For the first time, the community saw how deep the roots of bias could run when hidden behind money and prestige. Maya never sought headlines, but they found her anyway. A photo of her holding Samuel, taken on the day everything changed, circulated across news outlets, social media, and advocacy groups. To some, she was a whistleblower. To others, she was a reminder that compassion has no job title. Months later, she no longer worked at the daycare. Instead, she partnered with a coalition of educators and parents to create a new childcare program, one that trained staff to meet the needs of every child, regardless of race, income, or ability. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't have marble, floors, or luxury SUVs lined up outside, but it had something far rarer: trust. As she watched Samuel take his first steps during a visit with his father, Maya understood the true cost of staying silent and the even greater value of speaking up. Not every act of resistance is loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as sitting on the floor, holding a child, and refusing to let go until the world finally sees what's wrong. So the question lingers. When you witness injustice, no matter how small, will you look away? Or will you hold on until change has no choice but to happen?